Myth: using marijuana will inevitably lead to the use of harder drugs like cocaine and heroin. Quote, marijuana is a gateway drug. In drug law enforcement, rarely do we meet heroin or cocaine addicts who did not start their drug use with marijuana. Karen Tandy, U.S. DEA Administrator, 2005 through 2007. Fact: the overwhelming majority of marijuana users never try another illicit substance. Predictably, Ms. Tandy neglects to mention that virtually everyone who has ever used cannabis tried tobacco and alcohol first. Of course, it is not our intention to imply that alcohol and cigarettes are any more culpable than pot for driving folks to hard drug use. I believe, however, that it is important to state for the record that sequentially virtually all people dabble in the use of these two intoxicants prior to ever experimenting with marijuana. Yet it is hard to imagine that even the most ardent prohibitionist would argue that this sequential correlation would justify criminally prohibiting the use of booze or tobacco by adults. As for the rest of Ms. Tandy's assertion, it should come as no surprise that the minority of people who use highly dangerous drugs like heroin or crack cocaine have previously used the far more popular and safer drug marijuana. But despite pot's popularity, more than 4 in 10 adults have tried it according to the federal government. Americans' use of other illicit substances remains comparatively low. For example, data provided by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services indicates that only 3.5% of U.S. citizens have ever tried crack, and fewer than 2% of Americans have ever tried heroin. As for cocaine, the next most commonly used illicit drug in America after cannabis, fewer than 15% of Americans have tried it. But what about those minority of cannabis users who do go on to use other illicit drugs? Isn't the pot to blame? Not at all. In fact, experts generally identify environmental circumstances, not the prior use of a drug, as the primary reason why a handful of people transition from the use of marijuana to harder drugs. As noted in a report published by the Netherlands Institute of Mental Health and Addiction, as for a possible switch from cannabis to hard drugs, it is clear that the pharmacological properties of cannabis are irrelevant in this respect. There is no physically determined tendency towards switching from marijuana to harder substances. Social factors, however, do appear to play a role. The more users become integrated in an environment where, apart from cannabis, hard drugs can also be obtained, the greater the chance that they may switch to hard drugs. Separation of the drug markets is therefore essential. Or to put it another way, if U.S. policymakers legalized marijuana in a manner similar to alcohol, thereby allowing its sale to be regulated by licensed state-authorized distributors rather than by criminal entrepreneurs and pushers of various other hard drugs, the likelihood is that fewer, not more, marijuana smokers would ever go on to try any other illicit substance. In short, it is marijuana prohibition, not the use of marijuana itself, that functions as a gateway to the potential use of harder drugs.